This whole fubbing thing. You know what I mean by fubbing?
No.
Yeah, I'm sure you fub people all the time.
I'm just going to check my Facebook.
That's fubbing. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to another episode of Tech Society. Today we are with Professor Gary Martin, who's the CEO of the Australian Institute of Management, WA. Nice to meet you, Gary.
Thanks for having me on, Alex.
And my name is Alex, as always, and
I'm John.
Hi, John.
do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, so I was a primary school teacher many, many years ago, and that was a fascinating career. I think every day being a primary school teacher was a challenge because you had to work out exactly how you're going to motivate and inspire young children on a day-to-day basis. After a period of time, I moved on into the university sector and I started to train teachers, and I really, really enjoyed working with young adults and older adults as well, because there were a lot of people coming into teaching who'd been doctors and lawyers and nurses. They were all changing careers. So that was, again, fascinating. And then going from teacher education into university administration, I held various positions in university administration. Again, different world again, another great experience till the time that I took up the role of CEO at the Australian Institute of Management in WA. And that role, even after 8 years, I'm totally energised about what I do on a day-to-day basis there.
So is there a similarity between primary school children and people who need management training?
No, look, I'm sure there are some similarities, but I think there's one similarity that goes right across all those jobs. And that is that you need to be able to work with people from all sorts of different backgrounds. So in the primary school, it might have been, parents and grandparents and other teachers and children. And that still applies in the job that I've got today, working with people from different backgrounds, different levels of experience. So that's one of those themes that runs across all of the jobs that I've actually had. And the other thing is, as a primary school teacher, you end up being very, very well organised, very patient as well. And that organisational type of skills served me well right across what I've done, because I'm able to get things done simply because I'm really well organised.
Yeah, nice. I like that. Yeah. So what does the Australian Institute of Management do?
Well, what we do is we help to build or inspire better workplaces. So we're an organisation that is a membership organisation, and we help to develop people in the workplace, whether they're a regular worker doing a regular job, or whether they're moving into a supervisory role or a management role or a leadership role. We help to make them better in the workplace or to improve their performance in the workplace. And so again, we're dealing with people from a range of different backgrounds and at all different levels of their careers.
So in terms of the situation in the world today, it's one of those elephants in the room that you probably
Straight to COVID.
Straight to COVID. So you've done a lot of consulting on this kind of stuff. However, now that the shift to work from home has happened, and there's been a weird shift kind of to a hybrid work from home,
Sure,
yet in the office. How does that really impact what you do?
Look, I think the hybrid that you're talking about, you're really saying that some people are doing a little bit of work at home and a little bit of work in the office, and they're
like half in the office.
Yeah. I think that's certainly been a very prominent feature now that things have settled down a little bit in Western Australia. There's that. I think what we're finding in terms of the Australian Institute of Management WA is there's this overwhelming desire to come in to the office. So while the digital type of experience or learning experiences serve people very well, people were itching to get back into the office. Or into our premises, basically, or into the office, and then when they did their training, face to face with us. And so we've been able to manage that because we've got good facilities to do that, where we can spread people out, and it is truly a COVID-safe environment. And I think people have appreciated that, so they're happy to have that face-to-face experience. So it's impacted our business, but certainly the capacity to take people back in has seen our numbers of people coming in just grow over recent months.
But has the culture changed, or what is the future like? Is it as it was before?
You mean from working from home, or?
That's right, like the acceptance, having it as an accepted activity to work remotely.
Look, I think there is. I think studying remotely, working remotely, doing a short course remotely, which is obviously studying as well. But I think the culture's shifted, but I think it's going back to more of the hybrid type model. So people might work 4 days a week in the office and 1 day at home, and that's acceptable now. But I do have to say that working from home isn't working for everyone. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not working for everyone. There are a whole range of people in our workplaces who can't work from home. They've got children, their partner's already there and needs the kitchen table. There's domestic violence issues. There's any number of reasons why working from home doesn't work for people. And so while offices are downsizing reportedly in terms of lease space, or their office space, or their floor space, and telling people go and work from home, there are some people that can't. And so I was talking earlier about a different model, and that is workspace on demand. And that type of model is using underutilized spaces in businesses around the city and indeed around the country that cater for different people's needs and can be short-term, from half an hour to an hour to the week. And I call that concept workspace on demand, not work from home, but why not workspace on demand as well, or WOD? And I think we're going to see more WOD taking place as people try and confront the reality of, well, I can't work in the office because my boss wants me to work from home, but I can't work from home, so I need a variety of other spaces that meet my needs. And the needs thing is really interesting because some people work where there's complete silence, and other people have got to have other people around in the background to be able to work well. So I think this whole concept of workspace on demand, a bit like the Airbnb of your workspace, is set to actually hit our working lives.
I think there is that WA startup Space to Co.
Space to Co is one.
I think they're doing something.
How does it
like
relate
that.
to co-working spaces? Like,
well, co-working spaces is a level of workspace on demand. But if you look at what you can do with workspace on demand, there's no reason why I couldn't spend an afternoon or book an afternoon in a space just for me in a winery somewhere in the Swan Valley.
That's dangerous.
Well, it is, but you might be the sort of person that wants to spend some time outside. You like a little bit of background music. You like coffees being brought to you. Imagine having this little igloo, if you like, just being able to do that. You could do some really productive type, or get some really big jobs done in that afternoon, in that space where you really are energized by that type of working environment. That's just one example. You could then go and have a shared office space and be in a cubicle or a small space in a co-working type space. That's another example.
I don't think anyone would want to do that now that you listed.
There's the other thing available. Even in a coffee shop, there could be a roped off area. It might be in the reception area of a building where it's bright and cheerful. There's any number of possibilities that can be a workspace for people, because everyone's different in terms of what they like and what makes them work well.
So on this topic, actually, you've done a lot of writing, as I've heard. And is there any specific articles that you've written recently that you want to cover here?
Not so much cover. I guess some of my favourite things to write about, most recently, I've written a piece about how social media has killed off the school reunion, for example. So a couple of decades back, you would talk about people, you would hear gossip about people, You might create some gossip yourself, and that was about your former schoolmates and what they had or what they hadn't done in their lives. And then you had to go along to a school reunion. You had to go along to school reunion to find out what was true and what was not true. And there was this huge wow factor when you went to a school reunion. It was a huge wow factor. You think that person who you never thought was going to get to this is now the managing director of this huge multinational company, and the person that you thought would succeed most has had a life of challenges and not got to where you thought they would. So we have to do all of that, and there was that wow factor because you would go and discover
And be surprised.
and be surprised.
Yeah.
Now, by the time you get to a reunion, you would have seen about 3/4 of those people that you went to school with. You would have seen snippets of their lives on social media. And the irony of all of this is that social media has been used to drive people to school reunions. That's the way you find out. So
true,
on the one hand, social media has helped to bring people along to school media, but it's also taken the edge. Sorry, it's not school media. That social media has helped to drive people along to school reunions.
Yeah.
But at the same time, social media has taken that wow factor out of school reunions.
You're less likely to go. Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, what do you want to go along to a school reunion and hang out with people for the night that you probably won't see for another 10 years or that you've not got a lot of interest in? That's the attitude that some people have now. Not all people, but some people have that attitude. Find out about them on Facebook or Instagram. So my question really, and I've been exploring this issue, is has social media killed the school reunion? Not COVID this year, just social media.
Yeah.
So that was one of the topics that I've investigated. The other one that I'm just writing about now is about how employers are increasingly keeping tabs on people working from home using technology. And, we've heard of these nightmare type stories of when COVID first hit, our bosses said, leave your webcam on, right?
Yeah.
The whole time. Or I'm going to text you and you must respond within 20 minutes or I'll call you if there's an issue. So you've heard about that. But now people reportedly are having their keystrokes monitored, and there's screenshots being taken of the websites that this is assuming they're on a work server.
Yep.
Screenshots taken of the sites that they're visiting, and there's systems put in place now that if they're not at their computer, a little warning comes up and then it reports to the boss that this is downtime if they're away. These are the sorts of things that technology's done, to the workplace as well. While we always talk about technology as being great for the workplace, there's that downside as well. So I'm exploring that issue at the moment and looking at what we are doing to keep an eye on employees working at home and whether it's the right thing to do.
Do you think this is a policy issue that government should step in? Or?
Look, I don't think it's a policy issue as such. I think there's a ethical issue, and that is that people should be informed that they're being observed and they're being watched. And I think if that's made clear to people, people become far more comfortable. But you don't get the best out of people by not trusting them, and that's one of the issues I've been exploring as well. Some sort of surveillance might be illegal, but certainly an employer accessing emails and so on that are on the company server, they're going to argue that it's their right to do. It's their business.
They're seen as their property.
Exactly. So,
but the surveilling people like that, making sure they're on the clock.
Well, that's right.
It's crazy. As an employer, my personal opinion has always been, even though the person's at work for 8 hours, or online if they work from home, you're only going to get 5 to 6 hours of productivity out of them, and that's if they really like their job. Yeah,
and I think it comes back to the working from home thing. It does work for some people and doesn't for others, but once you put people in a home environment, you've got all these other things. So people are never going to be working those specific hours. That you've got to be more flexible about it. So your mother-in-law has just arrived at your front door when you're working from home. What do you say to your mother-in-law? Come in for a cup of tea, or do you say, goodbye, I'm working from home, I can't see you? When you're in the home environment and it's also your working space, it's not the same. So you've got to have a little bit of flexibility, and our employers have to have that flexibility, and most do.
Do you find that most managers are, which way do they fall? That kind of controlling or being a bit more?
They're getting used to not controlling and trusting to a certain extent. At the beginning, people just didn't know quite how to deal with having so many people working from home. And so they tried as many controlling things just to see what happened. Of course, that doesn't necessarily work. But, people then got used to it and saying people are working from home all the time. And now this resurgence in thought about, well, is this productive or not? And that's where this surveillance issue is starting to come back, where, you might have a screenshot or, as I said, of websites you've been visiting so that your employer can have a look at what you've been doing, basically. I've even heard of packages that are available that can take a webcam image of you every so often just to make sure you're there. And if you're not, employer gets an alert, or the boss gets an alert to say, well, this person's not working. Yeah. It's bizarre.
It's creepy. So.
I noticed that a lot of
articles, but it's real. Right. Yeah. But it's real.
Sorry, I noticed a lot of articles you write are very, very highbrow, possibly divisive. So, have you ever got quite negative feedback on what you've written from perhaps a manager who believes that he should be able to track his employees' every movement?
Very, very rarely. It's normally the opposite type of feedback. You said what I was thinking is the comment that I got. I was thinking that, you said it, you wrote about it, basically. And part of that is I'm in contact with so many people each week that I get to hear their stories about what happens in the workplace. And, there's stories of how gossip's caused a problem, how bullying's caused a problem, how cronyism's caused a problem. And then there's also those great stories about all the good things that happen as well. So, I rarely get someone say that was, really shocking what you wrote. I can't really recall the last time I got that. I normally get the opposite. Yeah, that's so true, or not. I mean, I'm open to hearing if people have other views as well, and I don't try and necessarily shut those down. But, when I put stuff out there, it's my opinion. Yeah. And I've got the right to opinion, and everyone else does as well. So that might mean that they don't necessarily agree with me.
And a good opinion, an interesting opinion, will have people who don't agree with it.
Yeah, I try and give different perspectives as well on things, and sometimes I go out of my way to try and make it balanced. I wrote about walking meetings, and standing desks as well. That was another one. Yeah. I wrote about these standing desks and the pros and the cons of those. And, some people swear by their standing desks, and almost to the point that their fitness is going to be, because they stand at their desk, they're going to be super fit.
The backs will be amazing.
But of course that's not the case. There's another side to it as well. Your feet hurt, your varicose veins increase. You think that standing at your desk is a substitute for going for a walk or a run or a swim or whatever. It's not. So I always try and point out, yes, they're great because we don't want to sit all day, but at the same time,
you still need to exercise.
You need to exercise, and there's some other drawbacks. So, there's that issue. And then with the other one that I started to talk about, walking meetings, right?
So I'm really interested in your perspective on that.
Everybody talks about walking meetings.
Steve Jobs was big on it.
Absolutely. But they're only good for some types of meetings. So let's not get carried away. If it's a conversational style, exchange ideas, let me hear what you think type of thing, fantastic. Okay. So, but if there's a series of things that have to be refined and developed and important decisions to be made, not so good. Not to mention, when you're walking along, it's probably only good for 3 or 4 people to do these things. When you've got 10 people that need to be at a meeting, who gets to stand next to the boss?
Yeah.
Who gets to be in the boss's ear about things? All these sorts of things are real issues for some people.
Yeah. I think the walking meeting, I've never been in one that had more than 3 people. It'd be a bit weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was a television show years back that really characterized the walking meeting as there was a president. I'm just trying to remember that.
West Wing.
Yeah, West Wing. The president would walk along and they'd have all these people and they'd have this walking meetings basically.
And the interns would be behind them taking minutes.
Yeah, well, don't forget that's the movies. It's not the real thing. So yes, and that's the other thing. I mean, there's even almost occupational health and safety issues of having these walking meetings where you're trying to take notes or look at your phones and stuff like that. You'll end up being tripped up by the person in front. So, everything's got another side to it. Yeah.
Now we'll just take a quick break for our message from our sponsors.
Vision is our art form. Emotions are the narrative. And we believe boundaries are just stepping stones. Film my video, telling your story.
Yeah, that's good. With your role with AIM, can I say AIM?
You can say AIM, but we're not AIM.
Okay.
We're AIMWA. AIM's actually a different.
AIM1,
yes,
yeah.
AIM's a different company in the East. It's our sister or brother.
Okay,
yeah.
So I'll just say Australian Institute of Management, WA.
Easy.
What are some toxic trends you're starting to see because of COVID?
I'm actually seeing some really nice things as well, but I think one of the things that annoys me is the whole issue of screen life balance, which is a topic that I've recently been writing about.
Business News.
Yeah, and one in the Eastern States newspaper on the same topic, because everybody seems to think, or it's out there, that screen time is really bad for you, and just like anything, too much of anything is too bad for you. But people, when they think about screen life balance or restoring some screen life balance to their lives because we've been living around screens, they think I've got to go on this massive detox and stay away from my screen for the next 24 hours or something like that. It's not like that. I mean, screen time balance is there's a number of factors. So one of the factors in working out how much time you spend in front of a screen, whether it's TV, tablet or computer, one of the things you have to say to yourself, well, all screen time is not equal. So it's quite different if my son or my daughter or my child was on a screen for 2 hours watching educational YouTube videos. That's different to sitting in front of a violent game for 2 hours and playing that game for 2 hours. So, that's the first thing. So it depends on what you're putting into that screen time. And the second thing is, when you think about screen life balance, is how does it make you feel being on a screen? Does it make you irritable? Does it make you happy? If you've been on social media for an hour, does it exhaust you? That's one of the things to take into account, what it actually does to your mood. And the third thing, of course, and this is the where alarm bells should ring, is if you replace screen time with anything that you would normally do as in your spare time, if it all becomes screen time, you've got an issue. So if your downtime becomes screen time and nothing else, so downtime equals screen time, nothing else, then you've got a real problem there, because you're starting to withdraw from some of the other things that you used to enjoy. So screen life balance is about thinking about those factors and coming up with what's right for you in terms of how much time you spend on screens, and stop thinking about all your screen time as the same as having a beer for breakfast or eating too much fried chicken or something like that. People think it's characterizing screen time as evil, when that's not necessarily the case.
I've actually been thinking about getting rid of my smartphone and getting a dumb phone, and I decided that was not.
No, I think
I'm not going to give up Google Maps and Spotify. And...
Yeah, I mean, why should you give up the things that work for you, as long as your smartphone is not your only friend?
Yeah.
You know, and there's that other thing about that which should get me started on another topic is this whole fubbing thing. You know what I mean by fubbing?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, if you don't, I'm sure you fub people all the time. You talked about your screen, right? You talked about your smartphone.
Yeah.
So you're not going to do it now. I know that. But an hour ago,
so I just pick up my iPad here and I'm just going to check my Facebook.
That's fubbing.
Yeah.
Well, it's snubbing. Okay, so it's phone snubbing. So this happens all over the place. Now you're having a chat with someone, and suddenly the phone pings.
Yeah.
They get a notification. They go, "Oh, excuse me, I'm going to flip the phone." Put it down. It happens again. And it happens again. How rude is that?
There's the hidden one now. They look at their watch.
Right?
I know, but that's the same.
Yeah.
But you know, you take that into the workplace, all right? You might have a good friend who's doing the same thing to you and it all balances out. You take that into a workplace. How many bosses do you suddenly say, I've got to take this call? Okay, I've done it before and I feel bad about doing it. But other bosses are constantly on the phone while your 30-minute meeting with me, I've looked at my phone 6 times. Does it say I'm really interested in what you've got to say if my phone's more important?
No.
That is interesting, isn't it? People seem to think that the phone is number one priority. My phone actually lives on Do Not Disturb, so anyone who tries to contact me is on too little.
So, Alex, I might be wrong about you. I accused you of being a fubber.
No,
but I might be completely wrong.
I'm I forget to respond to text messages and I miss calls. I'm actually, for a person who runs a software company, I'm not digitally illiterate. There's a different word. Disconnected. Yeah, I don't go on Facebook. I struggle to look at LinkedIn. You know, I guess I detoxed by default because I don't think a lot of these services provide.
Maybe your screen life balance is right. Maybe you've thought about it and you've taken into account some of those factors and you've worked out how much time you should spend on a phone or a screen and how much you shouldn't.
Maybe. I think a lot of the things people think bring them joy actually bring them the opposite.
Yeah, I think that's right. Particularly with young people, sometimes on social media, can be a source of disappointment, all sorts of things. I mean, there's some nasty trends that are starting to emerge with people, young people in particular, on social media. So, I think we do need to achieve some sort of balance in what we actually do.
So I mentioned before, I've got a daughter who's 3 months old. And I'm terrified of her being introduced to social media. And I just see it happening at a really young age now. She'll hit probably 7 years old and ask for a smartphone.
7?
I think, that's the...
Are you real?
So is it 6 or...
I reckon
don't know, but...
2 or 3. I think you're going to be headed towards some sort of device. I mean, I don't think you can escape it these days. Yeah,
it's crazy, and I was introduced to technology early. I started programming when I was 11 years old.
There you are. Yeah.
But it was it was like picking up a musical instrument. It wasn't like it wasn't
different.
Yeah, and it terrifies me to think that that's going to be her normal. We've all been in our own different ways introduced to this world, but the youth today grow up and that's the
biggest issue for younger people, I think, with technology is that screen time and downtime have become the same thing. So all of your downtime, when you're not working or whatever, you end up on a screen. That could be a television screen, it could be on a smartphone, tablet, laptop. That's the issue that we've got to try and break, even recognizing that some of that time is very valuable. So, and we wouldn't want to change some of those sorts of things.
So what do you think of workplaces that make their employees, leave the phone in a lockbox? It's not something we've ever done. I want to make that clear. But.
I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to do. But again, I just think that again, there's a level of trust involved in letting people keep devices with them as well. The the advantage of technology and having a phone is that you can stay connected with your world outside work, and that might be friends or family trying to contact you. And I think there's got to be a little bit of give and take, because most employers will expect people to perhaps go online after hours if an important message is coming through. So why shouldn't it be that you in the workplace can take a personal message in work time when you're doing perhaps some work outside your work time? And that, so there's that give and take element that I think is really important, and sometimes we forget. And as our lives become blurred.
So I'd like to know your opinions on the fact that the working world today works 5 days a week. So we had a conversation with Andrew Barnes recently, who is the author of the 4-Day Work Week. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I'm glad you asked that. I'm not a big fan of 4-day work weeks, because I think all they try to do is they try and pack 5 days work into 4. And I think we can get around that in other ways through more flexible work arrangements. 4-hour working days, I've heard people talking about them. I've heard about trials about, and what does it actually mean for a start? Does it mean if I was working, say, 40 hours, does that mean I'm now doing 40 hours in 4 days, or 40 hours in 5 days?
That's a common misconception.
That's correct.
This book. For some reason, the American readers always assume it's
10-hour days.
10-hour days for 4 days.
And I can tell you a lot of Australian employers think that too.
Yeah, but what we spoke about with Andrew was 32 hours a week, spread out over the way the employee wants. So that's
his research shows an increase in productivity. So actually more productivity than the standard 5-day work
less
week.
wastage over the week.
So it's been something we've been trying to implement.
Yeah, look, I think if it's genuinely a reduced working week and not trying to pack more work into those days, then I think it can work, because it's naturally the case that people, after having a longer break, will be more recharged and more productive and so on. And I think, as you're probably aware, when you go into the workplace, if it's 8 hours, you're probably not at your peak for 8 hours. You might be at your peak for 4 hours or 6 hours. I think there's merit in it. I think we're a very long way from getting to the point where we go to 4-day weeks. Let's not forget that a lot of people don't work 5-day weeks anyway. I mean, this is some of the loopholes with this. We talk about everyone as working 5 days and it's Monday to Friday, right? So that's not the case for a lot of people. A lot of people work night time, and a lot of people work on weekends these days. So the 4-day working week, across the board, is probably not going to work. It might work in some particular industries.
Absolutely.
And that's a difference. And if it does work in those industries, that's terrific. And I've also seen a little bit of research around same things that you're talking about, increased productivity over 4 days and things like that. People don't take a day off during work time to go to the dentist because they do it on their other day. But I still think we're a long way away from being able to have a lot of people going into that type of model. One of the other problems with it is sometimes, a business needs to operate 7 days a week, right? So what some people who are right behind a 4-day week think is, well, I'm going to have Monday off, or I'm going to have Friday off. Well, that's not the case. If you're a 7-day a week business, it could be that you're going to have Tuesday off. Who wants Tuesday off when they can't have a long weekend? Might be a Wednesday off. So, if there's a business out there that can operate a 4-day a week business and perhaps have a Monday closed or whatever, that's great. But I think at the moment, with businesses trying to be more and more competitive, they've got to be more and more flexible with customers. So the outlook is open more rather than less. So I think there's pockets, as I said, where it will work, and I think it will fail miserably in other areas, particularly with the overwhelming perception that 4 days means packing 5 days works into 4. That is out there, and that's what people believe it is.
Yeah, which is crazy. 10-hour. You're never going to get productive, quality work out of someone doing 10 hours a day.
Alex and John, why hasn't the 9-day fortnight been so popular then? I mean, we've already had one mechanism in there that's aimed to reduce that contact. It's called the 9-day fortnight, and some workplaces have that, but it's not been across the board, has it?
No, but that's much more than the typical hours per day. Often the 9-day fortnight is 10 hours a day, and some people can do that and some people can't, I imagine.
As downtime days, obviously lends itself to you being more productive and more rested when you go back into the workplace. But it depends what you did in those 3 days as well. You know what will happen? People get another job in those 3 days. So they'll work a 4-day shift with one employer and 3 days with the other. This is the trend that you're seeing in workplaces now. People have more than one job. So it's not just one job. You know, if you're going to be working for someone for 4 days, I'm going to get a part-time job on the other 3 days if I'm saving for a house, or if I've got this expense, or I've got that expense, or I want that, or if I want to take a year off. That's how people work now. So it might suit itself to a range of other purposes as well. But whether people get rested up from it, I'm not sure.
That's an interesting point.
And if all of your screen time is downtime in those 3 days,
3 days of screen time.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, did I say that right? If all of your downtime is screen time, then it's going to play havoc on your energy levels, I think, if you're in a 4-day week.
And now a message from our sponsors.
We believe that you can create art and beauty with technology. We think big. We move quietly. We are Ninja Software.
Well, Alex and I are in the software industry, and there's a lot of young people in the software industry, and there's also been a lot of focus on diversity lately as well. Getting women in, people from all walks of life. However, the point of ageism is something that hasn't been tackled very well, especially in software. But I just want to know what your opinion is on ageism in the workplace.
I think we're very ageist in many workplaces. I think even just recently, the federal government came out with a package. It's called the I'm trying to think about it. Just you can cut this bit out while I rethink about it.
The incentive. The incentive where
it's the job maker hiring credit.
Yes,
is it?
yes.
That I'm thinking about. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So recently, the federal government's come out with a hiring credit. So if you hire a younger worker, you can take advantage of that credit, and I think it's mainly for entry-level workers and so on. But rather than saying we're going to give this hiring credit to people who have been unemployed for extended period of time, regardless of their age, it's focused in on younger people. So employers are going to be saying, no, I think only go for
the old. I have to hire someone.
Well, how are they actually going to get people in the first place? In your job ad, does it say
must be below 35?
Which is extremely discriminatory anyway, and probably unlawful. So I don't know how you do that in the first place, how you advertise. But I think there's a whole range of ageist type practices in many workplaces, and older workers are unfairly labelled. They're labelled as technophobes, change resistant. They don't like change. They're slow, lack energy, take more sick days. Completely untrue for most older workers, because everybody's different. The other thing is that it's not just a case of 50 or 60 or 70 being considered old. Nowadays, 40-year-old.
35 is the cutoff.
40-year-olds.
I'm now officially old.
Yes, you are. You're welcome to the older worker club. I mean, this is the unfortunate thing with ageism, is that what I'd say are the tentacles of ageism are creeping, and so while it used to be 60s, then it became 50s, and now it's even people in their 40s.
So it's getting worse, not better.
It's getting worse. And it might be more problematic in industries like like yours. I don't know. But I think what I've seen in recent times and the people I've spoken to is if an older worker loses a job, it's very, very, very hard to get back into the workplace. And the longer you've been unemployed as an older worker, you develop this stigma, and it's the unemployment stigma that many employers have. So that is, well, you've been unemployed for a long time. Why aren't you getting a job? There must be something in your background that's preventing someone. Otherwise, you would have been picked up straight away because you've got qualifications and experience. So it's this nasty progression when people lose their jobs and they're older. The longer people are out of work, the harder it gets to get employment, or harder it is to gain employment, because people then attach this, not only this, you're old, and there are these stereotypes around being too old, but there's also this unemployment stigma. So you're faulty in some sort because you haven't been able to get a job. But the reason you haven't been able to get a job is because you're an older worker and people have been going for younger workers. Now, it's not all workplaces that are like this. There are some workplaces, in fact, many workplaces have a real mixture, and they're the best sort of workplaces to be. But you'll also see places have websites that discourage older workers from applying. You go to their homepage and they'll be covered with images, all of younger people, no one under 20s on that webpage. So that sends a particular message as well, that, you know, this is a place for young people. There's all sorts of things. The overqualification, as soon as you're an older worker, you're considered when you apply for a job as overqualified. You're told you didn't get the job.
Isn't that the excuse they use to...
It's corporate speak for you're too old for the job. So, you know, you've got all these issues that confront older workers. And I'm not saying that younger workers don't have issues, but we should be thinking about people, not whether they're 18 or 80. We need to have older workers in the workplace. And we need older workers to end up bankrolling their retirement whenever that happens, instead of having people pushed out of the workforce and then being reliant on welfare in their older years. So by pushing people out of the workplace, someone's going to pay down the track. Let's make sure that we've got older workers in the workplace, so not only can they remain healthy, have that social contact, but they can actually bankroll their own retirement whenever that happens to be. Because the other thing I think is that that whole concept of retirement needs to retire. Less people will retire. They'll stay active in the workplace, even if it's only for a day a week. And some people will even retire and then unretire. So there's all these interconnected things about older workers that I think we need to address. And unfortunately, in many workplaces, the way of dealing with ageism is by sweeping it under the carpet.
Just pretend it isn't happening, right?
Hard to prove.
Yeah. It's one of those discriminations that happen in the resume pile.
Yeah, I think it's the most normalized form of discrimination that there is. It's okay to describe the older worker in the office as Yoda or Gramps. It's okay, but it's not. But it's okay for some.
And the tech industry,
grey beards.
Yeah. The tech industry would certainly be.
But it's usually explained with reverence, where they've been around for so long, they know how to fix everything. It's a bit different.
Yeah, I haven't seen it used that way. I mean, calling someone Yoda or Gramps. I have to say that some older workers, and this will annoy people when they hear this, but some older workers are the worst or the best at reinforcing the negative stereotypes, I should say. So, you know, some older workers will say, "Oh, I'm having a seniors moment." Okay, now that's common. I've heard that a lot of time.
Yeah.
But all that's saying is that I'm getting older and I'm losing my memory. That's not the case for many older workers. They have very sharp memories, just like young people do. But we sometimes reinforce. Older workers sometimes reinforce those stereotypes themselves.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely one I've heard a lot. Having a seniors moment. I may have said it myself.
Oh, I'm too old for this.
Seriously, though?
I'm too old for this.
No, it's obviously been
exactly.
I'm too old for this. I hear people say that too. Yeah,
that's true.
It doesn't work. So it's a very complex issue. There's no easy solutions. But one thing's for sure, God willing, you're going to become part of that group, and you're going to become part of that group. We all are at some time. We're all at some stage. If we're fortunate enough in life, we're going to become an older worker. And so we better stop the discrimination against older workers while we're young, because we're going to become part of that group down the track. We're dishing up to discriminatory language, behaviours, and so on to a group that we're inevitably going to become a part of ourselves.
So how do you solve it?
Definitely not with a job maker approach.
Well, to be fair, with a job maker, that's great for younger workers.
Yep.
And not all employers will go for the job maker hiring credit anyway. So, it might be great for young people. But if we're going to have something for younger people, probably need to look at what else we do for older workers. There are employers out there that recognise the experience that comes with some older workers, the maturity, the contacts, all those sorts of things can be bundled up to make older workers, present in such a way that some of those stereotypes are just dismissed. So we have that, but it is an awareness thing, and we've got to constantly come back to these sorts of things. We've got to pull people up on ageist behaviours, just like we would if they were racist behaviours in the workplace. We'd pull people up. Ageist behaviours, we don't. So, we've got a big challenge to try and pull up people on behaviours around ageism as well.
On the topic of the government incentive programs, are you seeing a lack of wanting to get into the workforce because of job seeker and JobKeeper?
Look, there is some of that. There's no question that there's some of that. I think it's temporary. People are now starting to look towards getting employment. I know jobs being advertised. People are saying that can't get jobs to fill particular roles, and that's in hospitality and tourism. Even some office jobs are hard to fill at the moment. But I think that's temporary, and I think that's just starting to change now as people are looking towards getting back into the workforce in a big way. But you might say, well, people are receiving a payment and they don't have the motivation or whatever to go back into the workplace. My view is, if people have got that attitude anyway, you probably don't want them in the workplace anyway. They're not necessarily, you don't want someone to come into your workplace and feel like it's a chore to be there. You want people to be happy to be there and engaged and enjoying any type of job. So in the meantime, until people build levels of motivation and get excited about a career, it's probably best that people don't go into the workplace. Now, having said that, that causes a problem too, because I was talking to people, Broome hotels only able to operate 60% in middle of boom periods for them, because you can't get workers. Basically, they're just not available with the lack of international students and others that normally fill some of those gaps.
I think strawberry picking is suffering.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, and other fruit picking, and listening to the radio just earlier today, a hotel that had to close one day because the staff needed a rest and there were no staff to fill in for them. But it's easier said than done to say young people, older workers as well, go out and take a job in the country. Well, if you've got a family here, if you've got a mortgage here, you're hardly going to pay a mortgage here and then go on into the country and try and find a place to stay in the country and pay rent there as well, because it won't work out in your favour. There's all sorts of issues about picking up a workforce that's been city-based and putting them in the country. As desirable as that might be, it's not that easy as well.
And not for a job that's kind of low paying. You're not going to make that.
Yeah,
move.
well, people say, well, any job is a job. That's true to a certain extent. But if you pick up people, take them out of an environment where they're set up, where they're already paying rent, they might have a lease. They've got to go and pay another rent. And the big question with a lot of accommodation in the country is, can you get it once you're there? And that's the other issue that people are facing. So, very complicated, tough times.
You mentioned something about the employee needs to make the workplace a culture that the workers want to come to. So what are the most common mistakes you find that some businesses, they try to create a culture that everyone loves, gets up in the morning to come to work?
I think people want to work alongside each other and alongside the boss and have that open relationship rather than work in an environment where they're harassed or they're I don't know. I think that some people think that there's no trust. I think that some people don't like being micromanaged as well. So it depends on what your style is. They like a style where hierarchical levels are broken down, and people can mix and don't have to be scared of going to see the boss, but they can work as a partner in an organisation, in inverted commas, rather than being a worker and being part of at the bottom of the hierarchy or at the top. They want that sort of collegiate approach more than anything. That helps to engage people. When people think that they're going to work they go into a workplace and they're going to be scared to be there, that their boss is going to be looking over their shoulder all the time, that there's no trust. They don't want to be there.
Yeah,
understandably.
It's interesting that you focus a lot on the trust. A lot of people think that people just want to be better compensated for their time, which is always the case, but the focus here is on agency and trust.
Yeah, I mean, it's an element of it. People do want to be well compensated, and they do want that element of trust, and they do want to get some satisfaction from what they do. There's a whole range of things that go into the mix about, a satisfying workplace or a workplace where people want to be. Yeah. They don't want regulated workplaces where there's so many rules and regulations that it's almost impossible.
It's interesting because
to get on and do stuff.
As we are now in WA in Perth, there's a very strong heavy resources industry that compensates very well. But the culture might not be what someone wants. So you get this kind of golden handcuffs kind of approach where someone might want to enjoy life in a small business, but they need to pay off their Porsche.
Yes, that's right. So different people have different expectations. But I think what we need to do is we need to make the most of situations that we've actually got.
Yeah.
I think, as the job market or more and more jobs become available, there's more and more choice about where people go. So people evacuate is the word that I'd use, workplaces that are toxic, for example.
Bit of a talent drain, I suppose.
Yeah, and they move on.
Yeah.
And then, there are probably other workplaces where it's so cruisy that people tend to hang around for a long time, but they go stale because they're not challenged. There's all different types of workplace. There's some workplaces that have just got one, what people might describe as rotten apple that end up,
ruining the whole
place.
business.
Yeah. So, all sorts of different workplaces out there. And people will shop around. Have you seen, for example, the review sites that are out there now?
Like Glassdoor, I think.
Yeah, like Glassdoor.
Yeah.
Even Indeed, I think you can leave a review. And I mean, people use these sorts of tools now to decide where they're going to work.
So do you think it's an employer's market or an employee's market at this point, and moving forward as well?
I think it still has to, at the moment, I think employers are actually have the choice for some areas, but I think if as the economy starts to improve, then employees will shop around a lot more if business starts to boom. But I think we're a while away from that. People want trust, they want flexibility, They want some respect.
John mentioned agency. I think agency is a big one.
Yes, absolutely. And people will run away as quick as they can from workplaces that are toxic, where bullying is rife, for example, where there's a culture of bullying in workplaces. People want to get out of there because it's not good for their mental health. One of the problems that we're having now with that very term, workplace bullying, is that people are using workplace bullying as a label for anything that's unpleasant in the workplace. Yet if you look at what workplace bullying really is, it's got to meet certain criteria. For example, there's got to be normally a power relationship between the two people, and obviously the person that's bullying has normally got that power. It's got to be not an isolated incident, but it's something that happens over a period of time, or it's prolonged or sustained. And there's also got to be an intent to harm in some way, either physically or usually psychologically. So everybody goes around saying, I've been bullied now, because people accuse someone of unpleasant behaviour, of being a bully. Just like recently the Queensland Premier did when the Prime Minister asked her to relax some border control rule around a particular person. She retaliated and said that he was a bully. Yet that there was no doubt that there was some unpleasant discussion that took place, but that alone does not make bullying. And so now what happens is everybody runs around and says, I've been bullied. So it's really hard in a workplace. We spend a lot of time trying to clarify what bullying is and what it's not. And then when these sorts of incidents happen, people revert to saying, well, I had a disagreement with you, so, you know, the way you spoke to me, you were a bully. It's the wrong word to use in the workplace. So people will get out of any workplace where they believe there's a bullying culture, whether it is bullying or not. People do not like working in those sorts of environments. They want that trust. They want that respect. They want to be valued.
Yeah. I don't think we can add anything to that.
That's beautifully put.
Yeah. Every interview we have, we always ask a whimsical question. It's always the same question. If you've ever watched MMA or wrestling, you look like a big wrestling fan. So.
I'm not a wrestling fan. I was when I was 9.
Oh, cool. So you were a wrestling fan.
Yeah. Well, everyone was. It was on Sunday lunchtime. There was not much. There was no Netflix.
just Sunday wrestling. I think it's probably better than Netflix. So the fighters have their intro song. You know, when the lights turn off and they come out and the song plays.
Clearly, you're a wrestling fan.
I'm not actually, but it leads into the question: what would your intro song be?
with smoke machines.
Yeah. So the lights have dimmed. Let's say I know you do a lot of keynote speaking, so the organizer actually comes to you this time and says, "What song would you like to play before you come out on stage?" And so the lights dim, the smoke machine starts, Gary Martin's coming out. What's the song that plays?
Well, yeah, I think for me that song would be "She Drives Me Crazy" by Fine Young Cannibals. Not because I like the words necessarily. It's just the beat, how the sound, the song builds up and goes through some phases. So that's the song that I would have in the background.
Cool. Excellent.
Perfect. Good answer. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gary. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, John.
And thank you for watching. Make sure you head over to the website and subscribe to our newsletter. It's been a pleasure.